So today, if you've been here for a while, you will notice that over the course of the past month or two, we've talked about some pretty difficult, heavy topics on a weekly basis. And to put a positive spin on it, I guess we could say that these are exciting times that we live in. Our country is in dire need of progress and compassion and mercy because of our state of consistent regression. Again, I put it this way to people. It's like we're in a time machine going backwards with a gas pedal just to the floor. I mean, our planet's ecosystems are failing. California literally looks like a Mad Max trailer. I'm not sure if you've seen some of the clips of Santa Rosa. It's quite disturbing. We're on the brink of nuclear warfare, at least that's what it seems to be going on between our country and North Korea. The LGBTQ community, they're losing protection in the workplace, and they no longer have the same rights to serve in the military. Women are losing their health insurance. And our country is quickly devolving to a time when women were treated even worse, if you can believe it. Some of you may have experienced it. You may have been around for that. Even worse than they're treated now. Our country has not only stopped dismantling white supremacy, it is led by white supremacists. And it's backpedaling to a time where that is commonplace. The newest tax plans seem to only benefit the wealthiest among us. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, I have to end that segment by saying, etc., etc., because believe it or not, there's lots more. My point is this, that the world is not fine. The world seems to be on fire. Parts of it are literally on fire. We know that too well, right? And it's easy to fall into despair and bitterness. It's even easier to become hateful. I know because I have. And it's even shown sometimes on Sunday. And for that, I apologize. I'm sorry. Although I would not take back a word I said, I apologized that I left it at anger alone. Because when there is despair, there is opportunity for the church to make a difference. And unlike the recent past, today's message is not one of hate. It's not one of bitterness and anger. It's one of using our anger to fuel hope for a better tomorrow. Today's scripture, I believe, has so much wisdom that we can apply to our current situation in this country. Sarah's going to walk us through this, so be patient with her, because we have lots of scripture unpacked. It's not her fault, it's mine. I'm just saying that right now. And we're going to unpack this as we go. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. And then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not consumed. I'll stop right there. It's important to know where Moses is in his life journey right now. Moses lost everything decades before this because he stood up to the injustice being inflicted on Jewish slaves in Egypt. And because he stood up for them, he was living in exile for decades because he beat a guard to death that was assaulting a Hebrew slave. So he was an enemy of the state. And upon the realization of Moses' crime that he beat this guard to death, Thutmose II, not Ramses, like every movie says, Thutmose was the pharaoh at the time, tried to assassinate Moses, which forced Moses to retreat to the wilderness and to live in poverty for decades. Now because of this, because of the situation, I believe that Moses knew exactly what it meant to feel like that the world is on fire and there was nothing he could do about it. And he knew exactly what hopelessness in the face of an overwhelming antagonist felt like. He had to have. He was up against Egypt, an empire with a military might likened to Rome and even likened to modern-day America that would easily crush any uprising. And this monstrosity, this empire stood between Moses and justice for the oppressed, which were also his people. But what happens next, this is where I find encouragement. Because in verse 4 it says this, it says, when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called out to Moses from the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Then he said, come no closer. This is God speaking. Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Full stop. Now, we're not quite in the desert, at least not yet, in California. But we in California know firsthand, like in the Santa Cruz Mountains, what happens when there's a dry climate that goes on for a while. What does it produce? Fires, sometimes. Plants and brush catching fire would not be that unusual in the desert. Not something that happens every day, but it's probably something you've seen before. However, a plant not being consumed by fire would be a little interesting, would you agree? Yeah. So this theme of standing in the fire and not being consumed by it prevails throughout the scriptures. In fact, there's another story in the Old Testament of three people named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's fun names to say. I wish my parents would have dropped one of those on me. And these three, they were protesters that refused to bow to the king of Babylon. And the king at that time, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. Say that with me, Nebuchadnezzar.
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 Fun, and again, another fun name. We're going to call him Christopher, like every other person. Anyway. So, Babylon was another empire built on the backs of slaves and bloodshed. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were literally thrown into a furnace for their activism and for their protest. But what was amazing about the story is even though they were thrown into this furnace that was so hot it burned up the guards around the furnace. They were thrown inside. And according to the scriptures, not only were they not harmed, but the witnesses saw God in the flames with them. Not being consumed by fire is a consistent theme in the scriptures from cover to cover. And the scripture even continues. It says, then God said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. But then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who were in Egypt. I've heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering. And I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Again, all cool names that nobody uses anymore. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me, and I have also seen how the Egyptians have oppressed them. Ruh-roh. Now, notice the I language that God is using in this passage. This is intentionally possessive in the scriptures. The Hebrew words here for I are meant to communicate that it is God that is going to deliver the people of Israel out of slavery. It is God alone that is going to rescue them. That sounds awesome so far, right? Like, God shows up in this burning bush and is like, hey, dude, that problem you had years ago, I'm going to take care of it. And Moses is like, all right, well, I don't know what all this is for, but it's great that you're going to take care of it. Awesome, I'm out, and let me know how that goes. Thanks for taking care of that, God. Good job. Keep it real. And Moses probably wished it was that easy, but then God, like God always does, consistently from cover to cover, does something unexpected. God says this in the next passage. It says, so come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Wait, what the F? Like, what happened to all that, like, I'm the Lord your God that is going to save the day talk? This plan was supposed to be for you to do all the work and for me to reap the benefits. What is this about? I'm nobody. I live in the woods. I talk to goats on a daily basis. That's my army right now, goats. That's what you want me to do? So naturally, Moses has a bit of an objection to this plan. Because he's an old man in exile with no resources or weapons to combat an empire. He has some concerns. And then the text continues, and this is where I find beauty in this passage. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" But God said this. God said, "I will be with you." You see, the scripture, it not only communicates the mysterious nature of the divine, it gives us a glimpse into how this deity operates. And the way that this God, this mystery that we call God, operates usually doesn't fit into our own comfort zones. Because this is not a God that puts out fires for us. This is a God that gives us the ability to stand in the fire and not be consumed, not be burned. And from within those flames, God promises that not only will God be with us, that through the flames, we will stand victorious. Now, I'm not sure that that's the greatest recruitment speech ever, but it's the way this God works. And it's sometimes, it's frustrating, especially now for me, being a citizen of our country. Why does God not do this God's self? And through a lot of study, I've found that we, according to the text, are made in the image of God. And what that means is that we are meant to share in the burden of creating heaven and combating injustice. And that means that this God, as mysterious, as powerful, as overwhelming as this being seems to be, requires a vessel that is willing to stand in the blaze with God in order to combat the flames of tyranny and oppression. So again, this is not a deity that puts out fires for us. This is a God who leads us through fire and shields us through the flames. And against all odds, our movement will be victorious. That is the promise that we have. But the question that we consistently have before us is, are we willing to be that vessel? As I look at the scriptures on a weekly basis, I've learned that fires that burn from empirical rule, they're not alarms for the church to retreat and for the church to hide. These atrocities in this world, they're not meant to call us to exodus. They should beckon us into the furnace. And we have a guarantee that though we may bleed, the divine mystery will be with us when we're surrounded by destruction. We will not be consumed. We will not be turned to ash. We can do it, and together we shall overcome. Amen?
Amen.
So Garfield Park, the fires, they're burning. We see it on the news every week. And this world needs to be healed, and an equitable tomorrow needs to be constructed for all of us. And it starts by not being consumed with the rage that burns inside all of us. It starts by being willing and faithful to the cause, knowing that creating this world is a daily campaign, not a singular conflict. This week, Allie and I, we moved into our home, and we needed, by the way, we got a house in Ben Lomond, so I'm very excited. By the way, being a homeowner sounds good until you move in and there's a problem. It used to be, we could call our buddy Fernando and be like, "Hey, Fernando, dude, I got something going on with the sink. You work your magic over here." And he'd be over there the next day. Now we're responsible for it, and I have to fix things. And that's not good for anybody involved, including our house. But this week, we're combating problems that are going on with the house, and we also had to move our furniture, and then we actually had to get new furniture because the furniture we have is a little too big for our house. So we ordered one of those desks that you have to build yourself. You know what I'm talking about? The ones that come in a flat box. And Allie knows this, man. She laughs all the time. I hate those things. I despise those things. Last I checked, I worked at Garfield Park, not at whatever company we bought this from. Like, I'm putting in hours of labor. I'm not getting paid for it. It's bogus. I gave them 100% of the money for the desk. I expect 100% of the product will be completed when it shows up my door. So anyway, spent hours on this thing frustrated because I don't remember being their employee. And it ended up being put together. But what made it even worse was the UPS driver. He showed up, and you all will have to bring pictures of our house. It's at the bottom of a mountain. So there's a steep driveway that's like a roller coaster when you come out, when you back out, and just throw your hands up and enjoy the ride. And then it's up 3 flights of stairs, not because it's a huge house, but because it's on the side of a mountain. So the UPS driver shows up with this desk that's not completed, and he just looks at our house. I watched this from the window. He looks at the house and looked at the driveway and looked at the stairs, and it was the ultimate F this, it's not my job moment, because he totally sets the desk out and throws it on the curb and just drives off. And I saw this going on. I was like, no, wait, at least help me. So Allie's asleep at this point. Rains are coming, thank God. It finally rained. In about an hour at the time, it was going to rain, and this is particle board. This desk weighed about 200 pounds in the box, in the crate. So I was like, oh my gosh, I've got no options. Even if I called somebody, they're not going to get in here, in time to help out. The desk is going to get ruined. So it looks like I got to do it myself. So I threw this 200 plus pound thing on my shoulder and carried it up the driveway and carried it up 3 flights of stairs. And not only did he drop off the desk, he dropped off 2 bookshelves too that were about 100 pounds each that I had to come down for. Y'all, I'm surprised I lived. Thank God the insurance was paid because I thought I was going to die. But it worked out. I got it upstairs. I was tired. Maybe not my brightest moment. And I got it out of the box thinking, okay, the hard part's over. I would carry that thing up 50 times before putting that thing together. It was an absolute nightmare. I've never seen so many screws and bolts, and they're naming these things like I should know what they are. But I studied music and theology. I'm like, I don't know what any of this is. And I'm trying to put the stupid thing together, and I had this temptation to just give up, to just throw it out the window over the mountainside. There's no houses back there, nobody's gonna see it. And I had that temptation. But the desk had to be built because I'm going to be working from home when we sell the church, so it needed to be done. And I realized that the only way to get this done is one step at a time. One step. Carrying that furniture up that monstrous staircase that we have, one step at a time. Building this furniture that took hours out of my life that I'm never going to get back unless I stop eating fried food, which isn't going to happen. One step at a time. So the battle that we face, church, if we choose to answer the call, it's not like it's going to be a singular campaign. It's going to be consistently showing up in the face of adversity and knowing that against all odds, God is with us and we can overcome one step at a time. The question today is not where is God in the midst of the flames. The question is, are we willing to stand in the blaze with God? That is our place in society. That is the purpose of a church. Grace and peace to you. At this time, Sarah's going to come and she's going to lead us in the most sacred practice that we have in our denomination, in communion. If you're not a believer, if you have no faith, you have a place at this table. All are welcome here, regardless of sexual identity, regardless of race, regardless of religion. All have a place at this table and in mending the brokenness that surrounds us.
Got a bit of a labyrinth up here. So, if y'all don't know, I'm going to be kicking Christopher off the stage in a couple of weeks. November 5th, remember, 5th of November, on purpose. And I'll be actually talking more about, how I became a Christian in the first place. But it was actually a really difficult time. And shortly after I became a Christian, I went 3,000 miles away to the East Coast, a little different from here. And the first time I encountered like actual homophobia and really like heard what that was like, felt what that was like, it like shook my faith to the core. And I remember having like a really dark night, and a lot of other things were going wrong at the time, and it was a very solemn time, and I kind of just sat with this acknowledgement of what Christianity looks like in the world. And I said, I don't want any of that. I don't want to be a Christian. And I kind of don't care who believes this or who doesn't, but I heard a voice. And it said, fine, don't be. What? Like, I thought that was supposed to be the time when, God says, you're supposed to follow, you're supposed to be a Christian, this is what you signed up for. And in that moment, I was kind of just taken aback, and the voice continued, and it said, don't be a Christian. That doesn't feel right. Be a follower of Christ.
Amen.
Amen.
And so since that moment, I've tried to live those values and walk in the path of the Lord. The one who led a movement against oppression, against a horrifying empire that abused people that seemed to be beyond accountability. And he was killed for it. And the night before he was murdered by this oppressive state, Jesus took the bread in a room of his followers, and he said, take this. This is my body broken for you. He broke the bread. And at this time, I asked somebody to follow Jesus and to take the bread, to break it for the others at the table, to share, to follow in that path, to challenge, and to do good in the world beyond fear. And at this church, we practice intention, and that means we take a piece of the bread and we dip it in the wine. Which at this time, Jesus took the wine and he poured it out. He said, this is my blood. This is the new covenant, the new promise of the world that can be. This is my blood. It is shed for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And so I ask that we do the same, that we pass the cup, that we share in that promise, in that belief that another world is possible, and may we be the hands and feet of God to bring this world about. Amen.
One of my favorite quotes in church history is from St. Teresa, and she said that God has no hands but these. God has no feet but our own. Remember that as you move forward today. You have a wondrous, powerful purpose on a daily basis. And the fires are burning, but within those fires, there's a beckoning. There's a calling to be the presence of an all-loving God in the face of destruction. So with that being said, we're going to close out with our benediction. We have Hannah who
Hi friends, greetings
sent
from
her
North Carolina.
video. So
Hope you're all doing well. Winnie and I just wanted to say Christopher said that if I made a quick video, I could lead you all in the benediction this week. So if you're not already standing, go ahead and stand up. You're welcome to reach your hands out if you like to, or hold hands with the person next to you, or you can keep your hands to yourself if you want. And you can read along with me if the benediction's up on the wall. I'm not sure if it will be since I'm on the video. So if it's not, then you can just listen and I will bless the benediction over all of you. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness, protect you from storms. May he bring you home rejoicing with the wonders he has shown you. And may he bring you home rejoicing once again to our first. Grace and peace. Love with Bye.
Don't y'all miss Winnie and all her goofiness? So Hannah, as you know, she's in North Carolina right now, but she still, I check in with her every once in a while. And this is still very much so her church. And hopefully when she's done with school, she's going to be moving back. Hannah helped us start all of this. So if you didn't get to meet her, she's a wonderful person. And we still feel like she's a part of this church. And isn't it cool? Like so many churches shy away from technology. Isn't it cool that she can still be a part of this community from states away? I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. So guys, again, may the peace of the Lord Christ go with you. We love you. We don't expect you to leave at all. You can totally stay here, eat those donuts, because when they're left, I feel obligated coming from an impoverished family to eat those donuts. Please help me not do that. Stay, get to know one another. If you want to go to lunch with us, we always stop somewhere. You are welcome to come. Grace and peace. See you next week.